Now let's begin. The Monday morning sun cut through the kitchen window as Matt Caldwell poured coffee into his thermos. His son Billy sat at the table, pushing cereal around his bowl, barely eating. The boy had been quiet for weeks now, withdrawn in a way that made Matt's chest tighten with worry. "Not hungry, buddy?" Matt asked, keeping his voice light. Billy looked up with those wide brown eyes, the same eyes Matt saw in the mirror every morning, and shook his head. At 7 years old, Billy had always been energetic, talkative, the kind of kid who asked 1,000 questions before breakfast. But lately, something had changed. Matt's wife Hazel emerged from the bedroom, already dressed in her real estate agent blazer, phone pressed to her ear. She'd been taking more evening appointments recently, leaving Matt to handle bedtime routines on the nights he wasn't traveling for work. As a civil engineer overseeing bridge construction projects across 3 states, Matt's schedule had him on the road at least twice a month. "Flying out tomorrow?" Hazel asked, barely glancing at him as she grabbed her purse. "Cleveland. Back Friday." Matt studied her face, looking for something he couldn't name. They'd been married 9 years, together for 11, and somewhere in the last year, she'd become a stranger. No more lingering morning kisses, no more late-night conversations. Just schedules and logistics, and the mechanical operation of a household. "Bradford might stop by this week," Hazel said casually, checking her lipstick in the hallway mirror. "He wanted to borrow our ladder." Bradford Duffy, Hazel's younger brother, 32 years old and perpetually between jobs. He'd been crashing at their mother's place since his latest business venture collapsed, which seemed to happen every 6 months like clockwork. Matt had never warmed to Bradford. Something in the man's too quick smile, the way his eyes lingered on people just a beat too long. "Sure," Matt said, watching Billy's shoulders tense at the mention of his uncle's name. After Hazel left, Matt knelt beside his son's chair. "Hey, Billy, you know you can tell me anything, right? Anything at all." Billy nodded, but his gaze stayed fixed on the table. Matt spent the day at the construction site, but his mind kept drifting back to Billy's haunted expression. That evening, after dinner, he found his son in the backyard, sitting on the swing set, but not swinging, just staring at the ground. "Dad," Billy's voice was barely a whisper. "Yeah, bud. Do you have to go to Cleveland?" "It's just for a few days. I'll be back before you know it." Matt sat on the swing beside him. "Why? What's wrong?" Billy's knuckles whitened around the chain. For a long moment, the only sound was the creak of the swings and the distant hum of traffic. Then Billy turned to him, tears welling in his eyes. "Uncle Bradford comes to my room when you travel." The world seemed to tilt. Matt's heart hammered against his ribs. His mouth went dry. "What do you mean, buddy? What does he do?" Billy's tears spilled over. "He says it's our secret. He says if I tell, you and Mom will send me away because I'm bad." The words tumbled out in a rush. Years of fear and shame carried in each syllable. Matt pulled Billy into his arms, feeling his small body shake with sobs. Rage flooded through him, white-hot and barely contained, but he forced his voice to stay calm, steady. "Billy, listen to me. You are not bad. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. Do you understand?" Billy nodded against his chest. "And I promise you," Matt said, his voice hard as steel, "I promise you, this ends now." That night, after Billy finally fell asleep, Matt sitting beside his bed until the boy's breathing steadied. Matt sat in his home office with the door locked. His hands shook as he opened his laptop. He wanted to drive to Bradford's mother's house right now. Wanted to. No. He took a slow breath. If he acted on impulse, on rage, Bradford might escape real consequences. Matt had spent 15 years engineering solutions to complex problems. This required the same methodical approach: gather evidence, build an unassailable case, execute with precision. He started searching online, learning about organizations that helped abuse victims, about legal procedures, about what he needed to do to protect Billy. The more he read, the clearer his path became. At 2 in the morning, Hazel came home from her late appointment. Matt heard her heels on the hardwood, heard her pause outside his office door, then continue to the bedroom. He stared at the door, a cold realization settling over him. How many times had Bradford been here? How had Hazel not known? Unless she did know. The thought made him nauseous. He pushed it away, forced himself to focus. Tomorrow he'd call Dr. Summerlane, a child psychologist his research had led him to, someone who specialized in abuse cases. He'd document everything Billy told him. He'd build his case. But first, He needed to know the full scope of what he was dealing with. Matt pulled out his phone and texted his best friend Hugh Kidd, a former Marine who now ran a private security company. They'd known each other since college, had been in each other's weddings, trusted each other with their lives. Need your help with something. Can't explain over text. Can you come by tomorrow morning? Hugh's reply came 3 minutes later, 0800. I'll be there. The next morning, Matt sent Billy to school with an extra long hug and a promise that everything would be okay. When Hugh arrived, Matt led him to the office and closed the door. Hugh was built like a linebacker, with sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. What's going on? Hugh asked. Matt told him everything, his voice cracking only once. Hugh's expression went from concern to murderous in the span of 30 seconds. I need cameras, Matt said. Small, hidden, high quality. I need to document what's happening. I need evidence that will put him away forever. Hugh nodded slowly. I can do that. But Matt, you need to involve the police. If you're recording, I know the laws. I'll do this right. But I need to catch him in the act, on camera, with witnesses. I need this airtight. Matt leaned forward. I travel Wednesday. I'm going to make everyone think I'm leaving for Cleveland. But I'm not going anywhere. Understanding dawned on Hugh's face. You're setting a trap. He comes to my house. My wife lets him in. He goes to my son's room. Matt's voice was ice. I'm going to be waiting. Hugh studied him for a long moment. Okay, I'm in. What do you need? They spent the next 2 hours planning. Hugh would install micro cameras in Billy's room, the hallway, the living room, all legally defensible in Matt's own home. Matt would also wear a body camera. Everything would stream to a secure server in Hugh's phone. Hugh would be parked down the street, ready to call the police the moment Bradford entered the house. What about your wife? Hugh asked carefully. Matt's jaw tightened. I don't know what she knows, but I'm going to find out. That afternoon, Matt met with Dr. Summer Lane. She was in her early 40s, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that immediately put him at ease. In her office, surrounded by children's drawings and soft lighting, Matt explained the situation. I need Billy to be evaluated, he said. I need professional documentation of what he's experienced. Dr. Lane nodded. I can do that. But Mr. Caldwell, I'm a mandatory reporter. If Billy discloses abuse to me, I'm legally required to contact Child Protective Services and law enforcement. I understand. That's what I want. I want this official, documented, ironclad. Matt paused. But I need you to wait until Thursday. I have something planned for Wednesday night. Dr. Lane's expression was conflicted. Mr. Caldwell, please, call me Matt. He met her eyes. I know this is irregular. But if I'm right, my wife is complicit. If we alert the authorities too soon, she might warn Bradford, and he'll disappear. I've spent 2 days researching this. Predators like him often have multiple victims. If he runs, others might never get justice. Dr. Lane was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. I'll see Billy Thursday morning. But Matt, whatever you're planning, be careful. Don't do anything that could jeopardize the case against him. I won't, Matt promised. I'm going to make sure he pays for what he's done. Tuesday evening, Matt acted normal. He packed his suitcase, kissed Hazel goodbye, told Billy he'd bring him back a souvenir from Cleveland. But when Billy hugged him at bedtime, clinging to his shirt, Matt whispered in his ear, It's going to be okay, buddy. Uncle Bradford will never hurt you again. I promise. Billy pulled back, searching his father's face. Really? But I need you to be brave one more time. Can you do that? Billy nodded, and Matt saw something shift in his son's eyes. Hope, maybe. Or trust. It made Matt's resolve even harder. Wednesday morning arrived cold and gray. Matt loaded his suitcase into his truck at 6 a.m., making sure Hazel saw him leave. He drove to the airport, parked in long-term parking, and waited. At 7:30, Hugh picked him up in an unmarked van. All set? Hugh asked. All set. They drove back to Matt's neighborhood, parking 3 blocks away. In the van's back, Hugh had a complete surveillance setup, monitors showing feeds from the cameras he'd installed yesterday while Hazel was at work and Billy at school. The cameras were tiny, professional grade, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Matt stared at the screen showing Billy's room. I should be there when he gets home from school. You can't, Hugh said firmly. If Hazel sees you, the whole thing falls apart. Billy knows the plan, right? Matt had explained it to Billy that morning before school, keeping it simple. Dad would be nearby, watching, making sure he was safe. Billy just needed to go to his room like normal, and when Uncle Bradford came, Help would be there. Yeah, he knows. Matt checked his watch. School lets out at 3:15. Hazel picks him up Wednesdays. They waited. Matt watched the monitors, his anxiety building. At 3:45, movement on the living room camera, Hazel and Billy entering the house. Billy looked small, scared, but he went upstairs to his room like Matt had told him to. At 4:30, Hazel made a phone call. Matt couldn't hear what she was saying, but she was smiling, laughing. Then she texted someone. A minute later, her phone buzzed with a response. She's setting it up, Matt said quietly. She's actually setting this up. Hugh's hand gripped his shoulder. We knew she might be involved. Knowing and seeing are different. Matt's voice was hollow. The woman he'd married, the mother of his child, was arranging for her brother to abuse their son. The betrayal cut deeper than he'd imagined possible. At 6 o'clock, Hazel ordered pizza for dinner. Matt watched Billy pick at his food, watched Hazel check her phone repeatedly. After dinner, she sent Billy upstairs to shower and get ready for bed early. It's happening tonight, Matt said. She's getting him ready. Hugh checked his own phone. I've got Detective Ernest Escobar on standby. As soon as Bradford enters the house, I call him. He'll be here in 5 minutes. Good. Matt pulled on his body camera, hidden under his jacket. I'm going in. Matt, wait until Bradford actually. I'm not waiting in this van while my son is scared in that house. I'll stay hidden. But I'm going in. Hugh didn't argue. He knew Matt well enough to recognize when pushing back was pointless. Back door. Through the woods behind our property. There's a window in the attic that doesn't latch properly. I can get in without anyone knowing. At 7:30, Matt moved through the darkening woods behind his house, his heart pounding. The November air was cold, biting through his jacket. He'd walked this property 1,000 times with Billy, playing hide and seek, building forts. Now he was using that knowledge to enter his own home like a thief. The attic window gave way with minimal noise. Matt pulled himself through, landing softly on the dusty floor. The attic was unfinished, filled with boxes of Christmas decorations and old furniture. But in the far corner, hidden behind a stack of boxes, was the access panel to the upstairs hallway. Matt positioned himself there, watching through the narrow gap. He could see Billy's bedroom door from this angle. Below, he heard Hazel moving around, the sound of the TV, normal evening noises that felt obscene given what was about to happen. His phone buzzed silently. A text from Hugh. Bradford just parked 2 blocks away. Walking toward your house. Matt's breathing steadied. This was it. Everything he'd planned, everything he'd set up, was about to unfold. He checked his body camera one more time, made sure the feed was streaming to Hugh's system. Another text. He's at your front door. The doorbell rang. Matt heard Hazel's footsteps, heard the door open. Hey, Brad. Hazel's voice was cheerful, warm. Come on in. Hey, sis. How's it going? Bradford's voice made Matt's skin crawl. Good, good. Billy just got out of the shower. He'll be so excited to see you. They laughed. Actually laughed. Matt's hands clenched into fists. He heard them talking downstairs, casual conversation about their mother, about Bradford's newest opportunity, about everything except the horrific reason he was really there. Matt glanced at his phone. He would be calling the police now, giving them the address, telling them to come quickly but quietly. Then footsteps on the stairs. Bradford, climbing toward Billy's room. Matt moved to the access panel, ready. He could see Bradford now, walking down the hallway with that easy confidence, that friendly uncle smile that hid such sickness. Bradford reached Billy's door. Matt reached for the panel. Bradford's hand touched the doorknob. Matt pushed the panel open and dropped down into the hallway, landing silently 6 feet behind Bradford. Bradford turned the knob, started to push the door open. Bradford, Matt said quietly. Bradford froze. Then slowly, very slowly, turned around. His face went pale, eyes wide with shock and the beginning of fear. Matt? What are you? I thought you were in Cleveland. I know what you've been doing, Matt said, his voice deadly calm. I know what you've been doing to my son. Bradford's expression shifted, cycling through denial, then calculation. I don't know what Billy told you, but kids have active imaginations. Don't. Matt took a step forward. Don't you dare try to lie to me right now. Below, Hazel called up. Brad? Everything okay? Bradford glanced toward the stairs, trapped between Matt and the railing. Matt, listen, let's talk about this. We're way past talking. Matt moved closer. But here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay right where you are. Because I'm not the only one standing here. Bradford's brow furrowed in confusion. Then his eyes widened as he heard it. Multiple footsteps on the front porch, the sound of the door opening below. Police. We're coming in. Detective Ernest Escobar's voice echoed through the house. Bradford's face went from pale to ashen. He looked at Matt with dawning horror. You set me up, Bradford whispered. No, Matt said coldly. I protected my son. There's a difference. The next hour unfolded like a carefully choreographed performance. Detective Escobar, a veteran officer with 20 years in the department, came upstairs with two other officers. Matt had moved to Billy's room, sitting on the bed with his son wrapped in his arms. Escobar was a tall man with graying hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. He listened as Matt explained everything. Billy's disclosure, the planning, the cameras Hugh had installed. You recorded your own home, Escobar said. That's legal. And you had reasonable suspicion a crime was about to be committed. I have hours of footage from the cameras over the past 2 days, Matt said. Plus my body camera from tonight. Everything's time-stamped and backed up on secure servers. Escobar nodded approvingly. Smart. Most people in your situation would have just beaten the guy senseless. I wanted to, Matt admitted, his voice low. But that wouldn't protect Billy. That wouldn't make sure Bradford goes away forever. Downstairs, they could hear Hazel's voice rising in panic. There must be some mistake. Bradford would never. He's my brother. Matt, tell them this is crazy. Matt looked at Escobar. My wife knew. She facilitated this. She sent Billy upstairs early, made sure he was ready. She let Bradford Indiana. We'll need to interview her separately, Escobar said. But Mr. Caldwell, I need you to understand something. What you've given us is good, very good. But we'll need Billy to make a formal disclosure to a forensic interviewer. And that's not going to be easy on him. I know. Matt held Billy closer. We're seeing Dr. Summerlane tomorrow. She's a child psychologist. Good. We work with her regularly. Escobar stood. I'm going to have officers take Bradford into custody. We'll need you and Billy to come down to the station, probably tomorrow. For tonight, is there somewhere else you can stay? Somewhere Billy would feel safe. Matt thought of Hugh's place, then shook his head. My father. He lives 20 minutes away. Billy loves his grandfather. Perfect. Pack what you need. And Mr. Caldwell. Escobar extended his hand. You did the right thing. It took courage to handle this the way you did. They shook hands, and Matt felt a weight he hadn't known he was carrying start to lift. Downstairs, Bradford was being led out in handcuffs, still protesting his innocence. Hazel was crying, makeup running down her face, reaching for her brother. Matt, you can't let them do this. He's family. Matt appeared at the top of the stairs with Billy in his arms. Hazel's face transformed when she saw them, guilt and fear and anger all at once. You knew, Matt said quietly. You knew what he was doing, and you let him into our house. You let him near our son. I didn't, Matt. I swear I didn't know. Liar. The word cut through her protests. I have you on camera, Hazel. Calling him, texting him, setting up tonight. You knew exactly what you were doing. Hazel's face crumpled. For a moment, Matt almost felt sorry for her. Then he remembered Billy's tears, his fear, and the moment passed. Mrs. Caldwell, another officer approached. We need to ask you some questions down at the station. As they let her out, Hazel looked back at Matt one more time. This will destroy our family. No, Matt said. You destroyed our family. I'm just making sure you can't hurt anyone else. Matt's father, Leslie Caldwell, met them at his house in the suburbs. He was 72, a retired history teacher with kind eyes and a gentle manner. When Matt had called him an hour ago and explained everything, Leslie had simply said, "Bring Billy here. I'll take care of both of you." Now, as Billy fell asleep in the guest room, exhausted from the trauma of the evening, Matt sat at his father's kitchen table and told him the full story. Leslie listened without interrupting, his face growing harder with each detail. When Matt finished, his father was quiet for a long moment. I never liked Bradford, Leslie finally said. Something about him always felt off. But Hazel, he shook his head. I can't fathom how a mother could do that to her own child. I keep trying to understand it, Matt admitted. Was it always there? Did I miss signs? Or did she just break somehow? Does it matter? Leslie asked gently. The why won't change what happened. The important thing is Billy's safe now, and those monsters are going to face consequences. Matt nodded, but something still bothered him. Dad, the way Bradford moved through my house tonight, the way Hazel acted, this wasn't new. This has been happening for a while. And I travel twice a month. How many times? He couldn't finish the sentence. The math was too horrible. Leslie reached across the table, gripping his son's hand. You can't torture yourself with those questions. You learned the truth, and you acted. That's what matters. But Matt couldn't let it go. Something nagged at him, something Bradford had said in those first moments of confrontation. Kids have active imaginations. The phrase implied Bradford had used that defense before, that he'd thought it would work. Matt pulled out his phone and called Hugh. How'd it go after I left? Hugh asked. They arrested both of them. We're at my dad's place. Matt paused. Hugh, I need you to do something for me. Can you look into Bradford's history? See if there have been any complaints, any accusations, anything that might have been dismissed or covered up. You think there are other victims. I think predators don't just suddenly start. I think he's done this before. I'll dig into it, Hugh promised. Get some rest, brother. You've had one hell of a day. After hanging up, Matt checked on Billy one more time. His son was curled up under his grandfather's quilts, finally sleeping peacefully. Matt sat on the edge of the bed, watching him breathe, and made a silent vow. He wouldn't just see Bradford and Hazel punished. He'd make sure every single person Bradford had hurt got justice. The next morning, Matt took Billy to see Dr. Summer Lane. The psychologist's office felt safe, warm, filled with toys and books designed to put children at ease. Billy was nervous at first, clinging to Matt's hand, but Dr. Lane was patient and kind. Billy, your dad told me you were very brave, she said, sitting cross-legged on the floor with him. Sometimes when bad things happen to us, it helps to talk about them with someone who understands. Would it be okay if we talked for a little while? Billy glanced at Matt, who nodded encouragingly. Will it help catch Uncle Bradford? It will help make sure he can't hurt you or anyone else ever again, Dr. Lane said. That seemed to decide it for Billy. Okay. Matt stepped out into the waiting room, his heart in his throat. Through the closed door, he could hear the murmur of voices, but not the words. This was Billy's story to tell, his trauma to articulate. All Matt could do was wait and trust that Dr. Lane would handle it with care. 45 minutes later, the door opened. Billy emerged looking exhausted, but somehow lighter, like he'd set down a weight he'd been carrying too long. Dr. Lane gave Matt a meaningful look. Billy did wonderfully, she said. He was very brave. I'll be writing up my evaluation and forwarding it to Detective Escobar and Child Protective Services. Mr. Caldwell, could I speak with you privately for a moment? Matt settled Billy in the waiting room with a coloring book, then followed Dr. Lane back into her office. How bad is it? He asked. Dr. Lane's expression was grave. Billy disclosed systematic abuse over approximately 18 months. He has clear symptoms of trauma, nightmares, anxiety, avoidance behaviors. But he's also remarkably resilient, and I think that's because of you. He feels safe with you. He trusts you. 18 months, Matt whispered. My God, there's something else. Dr. Lane hesitated. Billy mentioned that his uncle sometimes talked about other boys. He never said who, but he implied Billy wasn't the only one. He said it was special, that Billy should feel lucky. Matt felt sick. So there are others. It's possible. I've noted it in my report. The police will investigate. As Matt drove Billy back to his father's house, his phone rang. Hugh, I found something, Hugh said without preamble. 3 years ago, Bradford worked as a soccer coach for a youth league. There was a complaint from a parent about inappropriate behavior with one of the boys. The league investigated internally, found insufficient evidence, and let him go quietly. No police report, no public record. I only found it because I know someone who worked there. Who was the boy? Family moved out of state before anything could be pursued. But Matt, there's more. 5 years ago, Bradford volunteered at a summer camp. Another complaint, same result, internal investigation, quiet dismissal, no real consequences. He has a pattern. Matt's hands tightened on the steering wheel. How many kids, Hugh? How many has he hurt? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. And I think you should tell Detective Escobar what we're learning. That afternoon, Matt met with Escobar at the police station. He brought printouts of everything Hugh had discovered, along with contact information for the organizations where Bradford had been dismissed. Escobar studied the documents, his expression growing darker. This son of a bitch has been at this for years. And nobody stopped him, Matt said. Because nobody wanted the scandal. It was easier to just let him move on to the next place, the next victim. That changes now, Escobar said firmly. We're going to track down every complaint, every incident. We're going to find those other victims and give them a chance to come forward. Bradford Duffy is done hiding. What about Hazel? Matt asked. She's being charged as an accomplice. We have evidence she knowingly facilitated access to a minor for sexual abuse. But I'll be honest with you, proving what she knew versus what she suspected is tricky. A good defense attorney might get those charges reduced. That's not good enough, Matt said, his voice hard. She didn't just suspect. She knew. And she didn't just fail to protect Billy. She actively helped Bradford. I understand your anger. But the legal system. The legal system is why Bradford was able to do this for years, Matt interrupted. Organizations protected him. Parents were paid off or convinced to drop complaints. The system failed every single one of his victims. Escobar was quiet for a moment. You're not wrong. But what are you suggesting? Matt leaned forward. I want every victim. I want every family who was silenced. I want them to know they can come forward now, that they'll be believed, that there's finally a chance for real justice. And I want Hazel to face every single one of them and see what her protection of Bradford cost. A slow smile crossed Escobar's face. You want to build a case so overwhelming that no defense attorney can plea bargain their way out of it. Exactly. That's going to take time. Victims scattered across different states, some who might not want to relive their trauma. Then help me find them, Matt said. Use your resources, your contacts. I'll use mine. Between Hugh's investigation skills and your official channels, we can locate these families. Escobar studied him for a long moment. You know, most people in your situation would be content just seeing the perpetrator arrested. They'd want to move on, protect their kid from more trauma. Billy will never fully move on if he knows his abuser got away with a light sentence. Or if there are other kids out there still suffering because we didn't do enough to stop Bradford completely. Matt met the detective's eyes. I want my son to see that when someone does something this evil, there are real consequences. Not just a slap on the wrist and a quiet settlement. All right, Escobar said, making a decision. I'm in. Let's destroy this bastard's life the way he destroyed those kids. Over the next 2 weeks, Matt became a man obsessed. He hired a private investigator to work alongside Hugh, tracking down every place Bradford had worked or volunteered over the past 15 years. They found a disturbing pattern. Bradford targeted organizations that worked with vulnerable children, inner-city youth programs, camps for low-income families, after-school programs in struggling neighborhoods. He preyed on kids whose parents might not have the resources or knowledge to fight back. But those parents had one thing Bradford hadn't counted on. They wanted justice. The first family Matt contacted was the Reynoldses. Billy Reynolds Sr. and his wife had filed a complaint when Bradford was a soccer coach. Their son, Billy Jr., was now 12 and still struggling with what had happened. Matt drove 4 hours to meet them in person. Sitting in their modest living room, he told them about his own son, about the arrest, about the chance to finally hold Bradford accountable. They told us there wasn't enough evidence, Billy Sr. said, his voice bitter. They made us feel like we were troublemakers for even asking questions. I believe you, Matt said simply. And I believe your son. If he's willing to talk to the police, to testify, we can make sure Bradford never hurts another child. Mrs. Reynolds wiped tears from her eyes. Will it really make a difference? Or will they just let him plea out to something minor? Not if we have multiple victims from multiple incidents spanning years. That shows a pattern. That makes it impossible for a jury to see it as a misunderstanding or a one-time mistake. Matt leaned forward. I can't promise it will be easy, but I can promise that if you help me, I will fight with everything I have to see this through. The Reynoldses looked at each other, having a silent conversation that only married couples can have. Then Billy Sr. nodded. We're in. By the end of the month, Matt had found 6 families. 6 boys, ranging from ages 9 to 15 now, who had been victimized by Bradford. 6 families who had been silenced, dismissed, or paid off to go away quietly. And all 6 were ready to speak up. Detective Escobar coordinated with law enforcement in other jurisdictions, building a multi-state case. Each family's story was documented, each boy interviewed by trained forensic specialists. The evidence mounted like bricks in a wall, solid and irrefutable. But Matt wasn't done. There was still Hazel. His soon-to-be ex-wife had been released on bail, staying with her mother. Her attorney was arguing that she was a victim too, manipulated by her brother, unaware of the full extent of his crimes. It made Matt's blood boil. He met with the prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Charity Trevino who had a reputation for being relentless in cases involving children. I need you to understand something, Matt told her. Hazel wasn't a passive bystander. She actively created opportunities for Bradford to be alone with our son. I have text messages between them, coordinating times when I'd be traveling. I have her on camera letting him into our house, sending Billy upstairs to bed early. She knew. Charity reviewed the evidence Matt had compiled. This is damning. But her attorney will argue she was in denial, that she couldn't face the truth about her brother. Then let's take away that defense. Matt pulled out another folder. I hired a forensic accountant. Bradford has been unemployed for the past 3 months, but he's been making rent payments, buying expensive electronics, even took a trip to Vegas last month. The money's been coming from Hazel. She's been supporting him financially. So she had a motive to protect him. She didn't want to believe her investment was supporting a predator. More than that, if we can show she knew what he was doing and still gave him money, still gave him access to our home, that shows deliberate choice. That's not denial. That's complicity. Charity smiled grimly. You should have been a lawyer, Mr. Caldwell. I'm just a father who wants justice for his son. Well, you're getting it. With the evidence you've provided, I'm going to recommend the DA upgrade Hazel's charges. We're talking multiple counts of child endangerment, being an accessory to sexual assault, obstruction of justice for helping Bradford evade previous complaints. She's looking at serious prison time. Matt felt a dark satisfaction. Good. There's one more thing, Charity added. We're going to offer Bradford a plea deal. What? No. Wait, hear me out. We offer him 15 years if he pleads guilty to all charges and provides information about any other victims we haven't found yet. If he rejects it and we go to trial, he's looking at a minimum of 40 years with the evidence we have from 7 victims. Maybe more if others come forward during trial. Matt considered this. So either way, he goes away for a long time. Either way, he goes away forever. He'll be a registered sex offender, banned from being near children, likely placed in protective custody, because even criminals hate child abusers. His life is over. What about Hazel? Do we offer her anything? Charity shook her head. Not a chance. She's going to trial. And every single one of those families you found, they're going to testify about how Bradford's pattern of abuse was enabled by people like her. People who knew or should have known and did nothing. She's going to hear every detail of what her brother did and what her silence cost. Matt nodded slowly. This was what he wanted. Not just punishment, but a reckoning. A moment where Hazel would have to face the full weight of her choices. The preliminary hearing was held 6 weeks after Bradford's arrest. The courtroom was packed. The 6 families Matt had found, child advocates, members of the press who had gotten wind of the multi-victim case. Matt sat in the front row with Billy beside him and his father on the other side. Bradford was led and wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed. He looked thin, diminished, nothing like the confident man who'd walked into Matt's house that night. His eyes scanned the courtroom and went wide when he saw the number of people present. Hazel sat on the opposite side, her attorney whispering urgently in her ear. She'd lost weight, her expensive clothes now hanging loose. Her mother sat behind her, looking frail and confused. Judge Jared Howell, a stern man in his 60s known for harsh sentences in abuse cases, called the court to order. The prosecutor laid out the charges, 7 counts of sexual assault of a minor, each carrying a minimum sentence of 10 to 15 years. Additional charges of grooming, exploitation, and traveling across state lines for illegal purposes. Then it was the defense's turn. Bradford's attorney, a slick-looking man named Thad Barber, stood and began his argument. Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence. These allegations are... Counsel, Judge Howell interrupted. I've reviewed the evidence submitted. Video footage, multiple victim testimonies, forensic psychological evaluations, digital communications. Are you seriously going to stand there and claim your client is innocent? Barber hesitated. Your Honor, we believe there are misunderstandings, perhaps exaggerations by 7 different children from 6 different families spanning 5 years. The judge's voice was ice. Mr. Barber, I suggest you have a serious conversation with your client about the plea offer on the table. Because if this goes to trial and he's convicted on all counts, he'll die in prison. Bradford's face went pale. He leaned toward his attorney, whispering frantically. The judge turned his attention to Hazel's case. Her attorney, a woman named Alyssa Riley, argued that Hazel was a victim of her brother's manipulation, that she'd been in denial about his true nature. Matt watched Charity Trevino stand to respond, and he felt a fierce satisfaction. Your Honor, the state has evidence that Mrs. Caldwell not only knew about her brother's abuse, but actively facilitated it. She coordinated times when her husband would be away, provided her brother with financial support, and deliberately created opportunities for him to be alone with her own child. This is not denial. This is active participation in a pattern of abuse. Charity presented the text messages, the financial records, the video footage of Hazel sending Billy upstairs early. She presented testimony from Dr. Summer Lane about the psychological impact on Billy, noting that the child had explicitly said his mother told him, "Uncle Bradford just likes spending time with you," when Billy had tried to tell her he didn't want to be alone with Bradford. Hazel started crying, her shoulders shaking. Her mother reached forward, gripping her shoulder. But Judge Howell was unmoved. "Mrs. Caldwell, I'm denying bail. You'll remain in custody until trial. And Ms. Riley, I strongly suggest you prepare your client for the very real possibility of a lengthy prison sentence." As deputies led both Bradford and Hazel away, Matt felt Billy's hand slip into his. "Is it over, Dad?" Billy whispered. "Not yet, buddy, but we're getting there." Bradford took the plea deal. Faced with 7 victims willing to testify, forensic evidence, and a judge who clearly wanted to throw the book at him, he pleaded guilty to all charges in exchange for 25 years with no possibility of parole before 18 years served. He'd be in his 50s when he got out, a registered sex offender banned from ever being near children again. But Hazel refused to plead. Her attorney convinced her that a jury might be sympathetic to a mother who'd been deceived by her brother. Matt knew better. Charity Trevino was going to eviscerate that defense. The trial began on a cold January morning, 3 months after the arrest. The prosecution strategy was methodical and brutal. They called Dr. Summer Lane first, who testified about Billy's trauma, the consistency of his disclosure, and the telltale signs that this had been ongoing abuse. She explained how children in Billy's situation often try to tell trusted adults, but are dismissed or not believed, and how in this case, Billy's own mother had actively discouraged him from speaking up. Then came the other families. One by one, 6 parents took the stand and described how Bradford had targeted their sons, how complaints had been filed and dismissed, how they'd been made to feel like they were overreacting. And in 3 of those cases, someone at the organization where Bradford worked had called Hazel, his emergency contact, to inform her of the complaint. She'd known for years that accusations followed her brother, and she'd done nothing. The impact on the jury was visible. Several jurors wiped their eyes during the testimonies. Others stared at Hazel with barely concealed disgust. Then came the digital evidence. Charity presented text messages between Hazel and Bradford, coordinating visits. Messages where Bradford thanked Hazel for understanding, and Hazel replied, "Just be careful." Messages about money Hazel had sent him. Messages that made it impossible to claim she didn't know what she was enabling. The defense tried to paint Hazel as a sister torn between loyalty and suspicion, a woman who couldn't face the truth about her brother. But when Hazel took the stand in her own defense, Charity demolished her. "Mrs. Caldwell, you testified that you didn't know what your brother was doing to your son. Is that correct?" "Yes. I couldn't imagine he would do something like that." "Yet you received 3 phone calls over a 5-year period from organizations where your brother worked, informing you of complaints about inappropriate behavior with children. Is that correct?" "Those were just misunderstandings." "Misunderstandings?" 3 different organizations, 3 different boys, all describing similar inappropriate behavior. And you thought those were all misunderstandings. Bradford explained that people were overreacting, that he was just being friendly. "So you believed your brother over 3 different families who had concerns about their children's safety?" Hazel's composure cracked. "He's my brother. I've known him his whole life. I couldn't believe he would." "You couldn't believe it, or you didn't want to believe it?" Charity's voice was relentless. "Because there's a difference between being deceived and choosing to ignore the truth because it's inconvenient. That's not fair. What's not fair is that 7 children were abused by your brother. What's not fair is that you sent your own son upstairs early the night my office arrested Bradford, making sure he was ready and waiting. What's not fair is that you took money from your family's joint account, money your husband earned, and gave it to a man you knew had been accused multiple times of inappropriate behavior with children. Charity held up the financial records. You paid Bradford's rent for 3 months. You bought him groceries, paid his cell phone bill. You supported him financially while he was unemployed. What was he doing with all that free time, Mrs. Caldwell? Hazel's face crumpled. I didn't know. You didn't know? Or you didn't want to know? Because your son tried to tell you. He said Uncle Bradford's visits made him uncomfortable. What did you tell him? Silence. Mrs. Caldwell, answer the question. What did you tell your 7-year-old son when he said he didn't want to be alone with his uncle? I told him not to be rude. That Bradford was family, and he should be nicer. Someone in the gallery gasped. Matt felt his father's hand on his shoulder, grounding him. You told your child to be nicer to the man who was abusing him, Charity said quietly, letting the words hang in the air. No further questions. The defense tried to recover, painting Hazel as a woman in crisis, suffering from depression, manipulated by a predator brother. But the damage was done. The jury had seen her for what she was, a woman who prioritized her brother's convenience over her own child's safety. Closing arguments were devastating. Charity stood before the jury and spoke with quiet fury. This case is about choices. Bradford Duffy chose to prey on vulnerable children. That's a choice. But Hazel Caldwell also made choices. She chose to ignore 3 separate complaints about her brother. She chose to support him financially when he had no job and multiple accusations of inappropriate behavior. She chose to facilitate his access to her own son, despite clear warning signs. She chose to silence her child when he tried to tell her something was wrong. Every single one of those was a choice. And every single choice enabled Bradford to continue hurting children. Under the law, that makes her an accessory. Under any moral code, it makes her complicit. I'm asking you to hold her accountable for those choices. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, their faces were grim. Guilty on all counts. Hazel collapsed in her seat, sobbing. Her mother cried out from the gallery. But Matt felt only cold satisfaction. This was justice. Not perfect, not enough to undo the harm, but real and tangible and final. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Howell addressed Hazel directly. Mrs. Caldwell, I've presided over many difficult cases in my career, but few have disturbed me as much as this one. You were in a position to protect your child, a sacred duty of every parent. Instead, you became an active participant in his victimization. You prioritized your relationship with your brother over your son's safety. You silenced your child when he tried to ask for help. The damage you've caused is immeasurable. He sentenced her to 12 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 8. Along with a permanent restraining order preventing contact with Billy and a requirement to register as a child abuse offender upon release. As deputies led her away, Hazel looked back at Matt one final time. Her face was hollow, destroyed. Matt stared back, unmoved. She wanted forgiveness, or maybe just acknowledgement of her suffering. He gave her nothing. Outside the courthouse, several of the families whose children had been victimized gathered around Matt. Billy Reynolds Sr. shook his hand firmly. Thank you, he said simply, for not giving up, for making sure everyone knew this wasn't just one isolated incident. Thank you for trusting me, Matt replied, for being willing to put your family through this. Mrs. Reynolds hugged him. Our Billy is finally sleeping through the night. He says it's because he knows the bad man can't hurt anyone anymore. That's because of you. Matt felt emotion clog his throat. This was why he'd fought so hard, not just for his own son, but for all of them. Every child who'd been hurt, every family who'd been silenced. Detective Escobar approached as the other families dispersed. You did good, Caldwell. Real good. Most people would have settled for just getting their own abuser locked up. You made sure he couldn't hide behind isolated incidents, and she said. I just did what anyone should have done years ago, Matt said. But nobody did. That's the point. Escobar clapped him on the shoulder. You changed that. And you know what? Since this case hit the news, we've gotten 3 more calls. 3 more potential victims from other states, years ago, who saw the coverage and finally felt safe coming forward. Even from prison, you're still protecting kids. Matt nodded, feeling the weight of that responsibility and the pride of having carried it well. The months that followed were about healing. Matt sold the house. Neither he nor Billy could bear to live there anymore, and bought a smaller place closer to his father. He took a new position with his firm, one that required minimal travel and let him be home every night for dinner. Billy started seeing Dr. Lane twice a week. The nightmares gradually lessened. The fear in his eyes faded. Slowly, carefully, he began to be a kid again, playing with friends, laughing at jokes, showing Matt his drawings from school. On a Saturday morning 6 months after the trial, Matt watched Billy play soccer at the park. His son was running with the other kids, face flushed with exertion and joy. It was the first time Billy had agreed to join a team, and Matt had carefully vetted every coach, every volunteer, ensuring his son would be safe. Hugh joined him on the sideline, 2 coffees in hand. "He's doing great." "Yeah," Matt agreed, accepting the coffee. "He is. We both are. You hear Bradford got transferred to maximum security? Turns out even in prison, child abusers aren't popular. He's in protective custody now, 23 hours a day in a cell. Living the dream." Matt felt a dark satisfaction. "And Hazel? Minimum security women's facility upstate. According to my contact there, she keeps to herself. The other inmates know what she did. They don't bother her, but they don't exactly welcome her either. Word is she'll serve the full 12 years. Parole board's not likely to be sympathetic to someone convicted of enabling child abuse." "Good." Matt sipped his coffee. "You know what the weird thing is? I don't even hate her anymore. I did at first. But now I just, nothing. She's nothing to me. A stranger who made terrible choices and is paying for them. That's probably healthy," Hugh observed. "Hate takes energy. Better to put that energy into Billy." They watched the game in comfortable silence. Billy scored a goal and immediately looked to the sideline, face lighting up when he saw Matt cheering. "Hey, Dad," Billy called out. "Did you see?" "I saw. Great job, buddy." Later that evening, as Matt tucked Billy into bed, his son looked up at him with serious eyes. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Are you happy? I mean really happy." Matt considered the question. His marriage had ended in betrayal. He'd discovered his wife had helped a predator abuse their son. He'd spent months building a case, testifying, reliving trauma. By any measure, the past year had been hell. But he looked at Billy, safe, healing, starting to smile again. He thought about the other families, the other children who were also healing because he'd refused to let Bradford hide. He thought about the new calls still coming in from victims finding their voice. "Yeah, buddy. I am. Are you?" Billy thought about it. "I think so. I mean, sometimes I still have bad dreams. And sometimes I miss Mom, even though I know what she did was wrong. But mostly I'm just glad it's over. And I'm glad I have you and Grandpa. You'll always have us," Matt promised. "Always." "I know." Billy yawned. "Dad, you're kind of a superhero, you know that?" Matt laughed softly. "I'm not a superhero, Billy. I'm just your dad." "Same thing," Billy mumbled, already half asleep. As Matt left the room, he paused in the doorway. His son was right, in a way. He wasn't a superhero. He was just a father who'd refused to let evil win, who'd fought with everything he had to protect his child and others like him. And in the end, that had been enough. 3 years later, Matt stood in a community center, addressing a room full of parents. He'd become an advocate, working with organizations that trained adults to recognize signs of abuse, that taught children about body autonomy and safe adults to talk to. He spoke at schools, community centers, anywhere that would listen. "The thing about predators," he told the audience, "is that they rely on our silence. They count on organizations protecting their reputations. They count on families being too ashamed or scared to speak up. They count on victims being too young or too traumatized to be believed. But when we refuse to be silent, when we stand together and demand accountability, they can't hide anymore." After the presentation, a woman approached him hesitantly. "Mr. Caldwell, I think something might be happening with my daughter. She doesn't want to go to her uncle's house anymore, and she's been having nightmares, and I don't know if I'm overreacting, but—" "You're not overreacting," Matt said firmly. "Tell me everything." And he listened, because that's what someone should have done years ago for all those other families. Because that's what would have saved Billy from months of trauma. Because that's what he could do now to prevent another child from suffering. The woman left with resources, phone numbers, a clear plan of action. Matt watched her go, feeling that familiar sense of purpose. His phone buzzed. A text from Billy, now 10 years old. "Don't forget we have my school play tonight. 7 p.m. Matt smiled and texted back. Wouldn't miss it for the world. He'd been given a second chance, to be the father Billy deserved, to protect other children, to turn his worst nightmare into something meaningful. He wasn't going to waste it. As he drove home through the evening traffic, Matt thought about how far they'd come. Bradford was serving his sentence, would be behind bars until Billy was an adult. Hazel had served 8 years and was released on parole, but the restraining order remained. She'd moved to another state, started using her maiden name, trying to rebuild a life while carrying the permanent stain of her conviction. And Billy? Billy was thriving. Honor roll student, starting midfielder on his soccer team, happy kid with good friends and big dreams. The trauma would always be part of his story, but it wouldn't define him. He was more than what had happened to him. They both were. Matt pulled into the driveway of their home. Not the house where the nightmare had unfolded, but their real home, filled with light and laughter and healing. Through the window, he could see his father helping Billy with his costume for the play, both of them laughing at something. This was victory. Not the arrests or the convictions or the sentences, though those mattered. The real victory was this: Billy's laughter, his innocence slowly reclaimed, his trust in the world gradually restored. The real victory was every night Billy went to sleep safe, and every morning he woke up loved. Matt had faced the worst thing a parent could discover, and he'd fought back with everything he had. He'd turned pain into purpose, trauma into advocacy. He'd made sure that his son, and 6 other boys, knew that justice was possible, that adults could be trusted to protect them, that speaking up mattered. He'd won. Not perfectly, not without scars, but definitively. And he'd spend the rest of his life making sure that victory meant something. For Billy, for every child who came forward, for every family that refused to stay silent. As Matt walked into his house and Billy ran to hug him, chattering excitedly about the school play, he felt a peace he'd thought he might never feel again. They'd survived. They'd healed. They'd won. And that was everything.